Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. As mentioned, our guest on the program, Brice H. Barnes. He served 2 tours in Vietnam. He served in a variety of roles, from platoon leader to company commander to PsyWar political advisor to the Vietnamese Army. He's a retired colonel, now lives in Dripping Springs, Texas, and he's the author of the book, Vignettes from Vietnam, Brief Moments of Sanity and Belated Notes of Gratitude. Brice Barnes, our guest on the program. Brice, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Actually, I'm very delighted to be here. Thank you.
It is an excellent book. What does that sound like? Because this was actually years in the making. I mean, these ideas started forming like decades ago. When you hear yourself introduced as author of the book, Vignettes from Vietnam, it's got to be a rewarding experience for you.
It's both that and also a nice way of reflecting on some of the things that occurred back then in a positive way. I try not to see too many skeletons in the closet, so it's been a good experience for me all the way around.
Well, yeah, you say with the book you're trying to convey a more balanced paradigm of the war in its entirety. Are we getting the Vietnam War in a better perspective with the value of time here, where we're able to look back and get stories from people like you and others and understand more about what happened during that period?
Finally, yes. I think that with the passage of time and a little bit of the diminishing of the animus that accompanied it back in the 70s, if you will, people are becoming a little bit more open to listening to stories or reading books about it, and to, again, maybe reassess their own particular preconceived notions of what they believed before. So if I can contribute to some of that in terms of a little bit better information and even some healing for folks, hey, well, I've accomplished a great deal then. So it's a joy.
Well, let's go back to the early days when you got involved with the Texas National Guard a couple of years out of high school. Talk about that experience, why you got involved with the Guard, and briefly with your military career, because you retired a full colonel in 1993.
Well, one of the reasons I initially joined the Texas Army Guard was to ultimately go to flight school, because a friend of mine had already gone through OCS into flight school. And he said, come on and join. We'll go fly helicopters together. I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. Except when I went to take my physical, the doctor looked at me and said, son, you're going to be a grunt. Your eyes aren't good enough to be an aviator. So I didn't know at the time what a grunt was, but I certainly found out later on. But, and then we kept, as the war was building up more and more in Vietnam, there was more and more rumors, or there were more and more rumors about our eventual being activated and nationalized and sent over there. So, and at the time I didn't have my degree, so I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and volunteer for active duty, qualify for the GI Bill, and meet the guys over there if they're going to come at all. So 2 years turned into a little over 7 in terms of my active duty time. But in the process, I did wind up with my degree and a few other things to go along with it.
It's interesting in your career because you were there competing with ROTC officers, West Point officers. You were thrown in with some people that had some heavy-duty credentials.
Well, that's true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were quality. I mean, we won't go into the names or anything of that sort, but there are some of them that, let's say, just did not bring honor to the source of their commission. How's that? That's
interesting. And so many people would be intimidated by that and think, wow, this guy is West Point. I better, get out of his way or pay attention to him. And you decided, I can do it just as well as you can, and possibly even better.
As a matter of fact, it was better. So be that as it may. And, facts is facts.
The book we're talking about is Vignettes from Vietnam, Brief Moments of Sanity and Belated Notes of Gratitude. Brice Barnes, our guest on the program. Information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. The book's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all across the country. It is a fascinating book. And I want to talk about how this whole thing came about. And let's go back to the second tour of duty in Vietnam. You went to the Austin newspaper and said, I'd like to write some stories from over there, firsthand account. And you made a whopping $10 for each story that you wrote. So you found out early on journalism doesn't necessarily pay a whole lot of money.
No, it hasn't yet either. But it was just more of an opportunity to get some of my viewpoint into the local paper from just the grunt's eye view of the world, rather than what they might have been reading from another source. But it had its place.
Then in 1988, you're working with a group of veterans, and they're having a discussion group, and they want you to write stories about your experiences in Vietnam. And this just what sort of furthered this process as you're writing that. Talk about that experience and how that sort of rekindled your desire to put some of these stories down on paper. And along the way, you decided, I got some people I really should have said thank you to, and I'm not sure that I did it properly at the time.
Exactly. And it was one of those what you would call an epiphany moment, so that we were asked to write about the most traumatic incident that ever occurred to us overseas. Well, obviously for me, that was my involvement in the Tet Offensive, or in my case, the Tet Counteroffensive. So after writing that, and it was a very cathartic process at the time, about a few weeks after I completed that article, I get this self-addressed envelope from the Department of the Army. And then when I opened it up, there was another envelope inside from another author by the name of Keith William Nolan. Unfortunately, a young military historian who since passed away. But anyway, he asked me, or just who was concerned, if I would like to contribute to his effort to writing a book about the history of the Battle of Saigon. Well, we were, during the counteroffensive, we were very close to that, involved in it very heavily. So I had just sent him a copy of what I had written, and then we started communicating very diligently after that. And what I wrote ultimately became chapter 14 in his book, called The Battle for Saigon. And then it did, as you said, it did rekindle some interest in myself of sharing my stories with other people, and then they enjoyed it. So I thought, well, maybe there's some other things I ought to put down on paper as well.
Our guest on This Week in America is Brice Barnes. His book is called Vignettes from Vietnam, Brief Moments of Sanity and Belated Notes of Gratitude. The book's available all across the country. Information, of course, at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And then you're working after you retire with Northrop Grumman, and people there are asking you stories, and you're recollecting and putting these down. I guess it's at that point when you realized, okay, I really need to do something with this, and I really need to go back and express my gratitude to people. And at the end of each vignette, you dedicate it to somebody. You're talking about why this experience is so meaningful to you. So you really followed through with this in thanking people.
As a matter of fact, it was a little bit of a growth process for me to realize I had not been as grateful as I should have been. So that was one of the main efforts for selecting the title that I did, to go ahead and express gratitude for people who had contributed a major part of the whole book, or that part of the book itself, and to make me more aware of, that the whole thing was such a team effort, and to express my gratitude for all that they contributed.
As you read the book Vignettes from Vietnam, Brief Moments of Sanity, Belated Notes of Gratitude, I can understand why maybe expressing gratitude is not at the top of the list. You're looking out for yourself. You're looking out for everybody. It's a fluid situation over there. It really doesn't lend itself at that time, does it, to too much gratitude? You're just worried about survival and accomplishing a mission at that point.
The gratitude did not take priority one at that time. Is survival, I think, was the main key. So. And that's understandable.
Yes.
In the heat of the battle, you don't really start and think in too much depth at the time. You just think you're just more autonomically reacting. That's rather than that. So you just have to kind of put the gratitude where it belongs. Finally at the end, and finally as you wake up.
Another impetus was, as you say you'll never watch another Oliver Stone movie, you see movies, you see stories that are written with inconsistencies or coming at it from a particular point of view in an article or in a magazine. And part of what you wanted to do was really sort of set the record straight from someone who was actually there. No spin on either side, just your recollection of what happened and why you were there and why the mission was so important.
Well, at the time, and still am, I was a ardent anti-communist, and I thought that if I could do something to help the folks of South Vietnam create a situation and an environment where they could have the same types of freedoms and liberties that we were enjoying at the time in America, then that was my purpose in life. And so what I was over there doing was to not really protecting America, because the North Vietnamese were never a threat to America. But I was trying to protect the South Vietnamese in their efforts to become a reasonable, self-governing group of folks, and then again to express and be able to operate, to enjoy the freedoms that we have. So that was my basic motivation. And again, it was just more of trying to give them something that I was enjoying and that they should enjoy as well.
The book is Vignettes from Vietnam, Brief Moments of Sanity and Belated Notes of Gratitude. Brice Barnes, a highly decorated combat veteran, our guest on the program. In talking about some of the vignettes in the book, Cookies and the Church Ladies is fascinating. And you talk about how really your lifeline over there is getting mail. You're in the hospital recovering from what you call the fever of unknown origin, which I understand was running rampant over at the time. If they didn't know what it was, that's what they called it, the fever of unknown origin. And you got a couple of mail bags, guys going through with a couple of mail bags. You're thinking, if I get lucky, I may get an envelope or two out of there. They were all for you. Talk about that experience, because this has really stayed with you and given you, you're still giving back today.
As a matter of fact, both full mail sacks, and these are probably weighing anywhere from 50 to 60 pounds apiece, contained packages were coffee cans, and inside were cookies. We found out later on. Every one of them was addressed to me, and they came from a church I attended when I was living in Austin, Texas. And I couldn't even pick them up because I was just getting out of the hospital, and I was emaciated and weak to begin with, and I finally had to have the mail clerk haul them out to my Jeep. So I went back to the base camp. And when we got there were every conceivable type of cookie in the world, from chocolate chip to oatmeal, raisin, macaroons, you name it. And the church I went to had a lot of Scandinavians in it, so they knew how to make really, really great cookies. So every one of my men got at least one can of cookies. And then they traded them off. Then we ate so many we almost got sick. But then we ate the popcorn, which was inside. That was a cushioning mechanism, and that was just a great departure from the eating sea rations 3 meals a day. So, but then I required that all my guys write some letters back to these ladies, the church ladies, thanking them for the cookies that they sent over there. So it was a joyous event for all indeed.
And when you got back, you realized, okay, we need to do this for others as well, knowing what that meant, just getting the simple act of getting cookies, knowing somebody cares, and having, like you said, something a little different than the normal diet over there was really meaningful to your existence there.
Well, yeah, I took it a little bit step further, and I still send packages over to either our guys in Afghanistan and other places. And I make homemade beef jerky, and my wife and I make some of the world's best chocolate chip brownies. And in fact, I've got another batch of jerky I'll have to start tomorrow. And it's just to reward these guys for protecting us old graybeards over here. As I explained to them, I still retain the skill sets I used 45 years ago or more, but I prefer not to have to use them, and that's why I want to express my gratitude to them for their protecting the good folks here in America. So another package is going out over to Afghanistan in the very near future.
Brice Barnes, our guest on This Week in America, highly decorated combat veteran, retired in 1993, a full colonel. His book is Vignettes from Vietnam, Brief Moments of Sanity and Belated Notes of Gratitude. The book's available all across the country. You can find information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. A few minutes left in the program, going by way too quickly. Another vignette in there, you're talking about the Tet counteroffensive, and you talk about the blue veil. Describe what you went through at that point in time. It was a very important part of your reflective nature of what happened there, and your gratitude for your gratitude towards God, in addition to other people who helped you through situations.
Precisely. When it was happening, I wasn't really sure what it was, obviously, because I didn't have time nor the mindset to just do the reflective thought process that was necessary. But days later, I got to think about it, and I could just distinctly recall it was a blue veil all around me, but it was translucent. I could see through it. I could hear through it. Everything was obvious, but it was there. I mean, it was so palpable. I could almost reach out and touch it. Interestingly enough, during that time when the veil was around me, I couldn't say anything wrong. I couldn't do anything wrong, and I was protected. I mean, literally, I had bullets flying over me, underneath me, between my legs, all the way around me. And the interesting thing I learned then is that when a bullet goes by you, it breaks the sound barrier, and you hear this little cracking sound. And thankfully, the cracking sound was outside of my body, not inside. So, I was able to do things in a literally superhuman way that I just attribute as a gift of God. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that opportunity I had to help save people. And I'm even more grateful today for what I have now and for my Lord.
One of the many vignettes in the book, Vignettes from Vietnam, Brief Moments of Sanity and Belated Notes of Gratitude. Brice H. Barnes, our guest in the program, author of the book. At the end of the book, you talk about our sacrifice, our noble cause was totally misinterpreted, and we began to doubt ourselves. But the passage of time, the appreciation of who we are and what we accomplished really comes forward. Break that down into a couple of areas there with the misrepresentation. Did eventually that get to you and to others in Vietnam where you began to doubt yourself? Do you go through that period?
Some did. I just refused to, in the sense that I was convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that what we were doing was the right thing. What was incorrect was the politics that was associated with it, and some of the strategic thinking that was done or not done. For example, the war was micromanaged in many respects by the Johnson White House. And we see the same problems existing today and how to fight this the global war on Islamic terrorism. The Pentagon has been hamstrung and is shackled and just pretty much eliminated from the decision-making process of what to do. That attitude existed in Vietnam to the detriment of ultimately our efforts and to the people of South Vietnam themselves. So we need to reassess why we were there, and our cause was really just. We were trying to bring freedom to that country, and that's not an ignoble thing at all. And we need to, I think forward as well in our relationship today of what we're doing militarily, and not micromanage the whole war effort.
There's so many interesting stories that we could talk about, and I would love to have Brice back in the program. Vignettes from Vietnam is the name of the book, Brief Moments of Sanity and Belated Notes of Gratitude. Brice H. Barnes, our guest on the program. The book's available at Barnes & Noble. It's available at Amazon all across the country. You can link on directly and get information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Brice, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. I really loved reading the book. I would love to have you back on the program. Got so much more we can talk about. Thank you for being with us on the show today.
It's been my honor. I hope you have a great day there, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you. You too, Brice. Once again, the name of the book, Vignettes from Vietnam, Brief Moments of Sanity and Belated Notes of Gratitude. Brice Barnes, our guest on This Week in America. Information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.